Thank you for joining Black Superwoman Chronicles for our newest series, Young Creatives Corner, or YCC. YCC is a series of interviews that was created out of necessity as a place for young Black female artists to have a place to showcase their work while networking with other artists around the country.
Black people were not given the same opportunity because there are Black people in those spaces. They're just not being seen, they're not being heard, they're being pushed aside. And I know there are times where companies really try to push and say, oh, we want more Black people, but the Black people they even have on their team, what are you actually doing for them there? And we can see there's nothing to show. That's why I definitely believe in the art community. Like there needs to be a bigger push to really elevate these artists because there's so many different parts of the art community, like different mediums. Like you don't hear about like different sculptures or just even painters or even digital art illustration. Like it's becoming such a big thing where art is so broad in how you can describe it, but yeah, we're still struggling to get our voice heard.
Oh, Boma, welcome to Young Creatives Corner. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on. I'm very excited.
Yes. So, first, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your art?
Yes. So my name is Boma. I am 22 years old and I've been creating art since, honestly, since I want to say four because that's as far as I can remember. But I really started taking it more serious when I got to high school and I started to notice one thing within the arts, how there's not as many Black people in it, or not even to say there are not enough Black people in it, but we're not highlighted, we're not showcased. So as I went through college, going through it, I started noticing or trying to make sure that my art itself was more impactful or more purposeful because I've been given the opportunity to be creating art where I'm actually growing, I'm learning from different professors, people actually in the art career who understand how the world works in that element. So it's been very interesting going through it, but I just want to make sure, like a lot of times, my art focuses on Black people, specifically Black women, so that we're just shown in a more loving and more positive view compared to what society usually does for us. So
Yeah.
that's my art for the most part.
I love that so much. And of course, our brand is Black Superwoman Chronicles. So definitely some alignment there. Um, I guess you talked about like how there's like not enough representation of Black women, but also like how that representation might often be negative or not like positive enough. So I guess how do you think that your work like inspires other people, and how do you think that you see yourself creating like more positive representations of Black women?
Yeah, so just even growing up, I've noticed just the way people would talk about Black women, the way they would just view us, especially if you're even darker, it's much more harsh. And I really wanted to make sure that when I was creating my art, it was purposeful, that it was, you were able to see yourself and say, wow, this is so beautiful. Like someone would want to depict me. And it wasn't until I think recently, a couple months ago, someone said, I really enjoy your art because I see myself in it. And honestly, at that point, just I was just so happy and bubbly inside, like, oh my gosh, it's actually coming true because I want some young girl to go to an art museum and see herself in there. So that's why I continue to make sure that when I'm showing Black women, I want them to be happy. I want it to be a person where it's like they're beautiful. There's something about them where your eyes cannot leave the art piece. So that's really one thing I'm aiming for when creating. Like I just want someone to be able to say, "Oh, that's me in that picture," and I feel beautiful from it as well.
That is so awesome, and I love that so much. Even you talking about like the diversity within like being Black. There's no one way to be a Black person, and I love that so much, and that you are representing Black women, and that other people have even talked to you about how they feel represented. So, thank you so much for the work that you create.
Oh,
Um, no, for real. I wanted to ask you. Also about like I saw from your form that you wanted to talk about your paintings, but I also noticed that you did like a lot of pencil art. So do you still do pencil art, and like how is it, or like how do you manage like transitioning from one medium to the other?
Yeah. So with mediums, I feel like this is pretty universal with artists. If you stop using one, when you go back to it, it's like you're learning it all over again. And honestly, that's how I feel at times. I actually, for the past, I want to say 2 years, I've been primarily using color pencil for my art. Just because when I do paintings, I like those ones to be very impactful. Like there's such a deeper message, while with a lot of my color pencil pieces, I'm more free, more just want people to see like a happy moment or something just in my mind. Let me actually get up and show you some of the work.
Yes.
And always trying to angle it so the light doesn't hit too hard, but
Yeah.
this is one of them. And then the second one.
I love these so much.
Yeah. So I just really, I don't know, with color pencil, I like to be creative, just whatever comes to my mind. And I've noticed I have like a thing into like universe and galaxies. I like space, so that's always something I like to incorporate for color pencil pieces.
Yeah. I noticed that about your work. Like, it's often like, it takes black girl magic to like a whole new level because it is like magical elements and also like these scientific or science fiction elements. So I definitely feel like it has like Afrofuturistic vibes to it. And I love that because I feel like as black women, we're often like left out of that narrative, like the futuristic narrative. And that was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, like, um, you obviously have like this space in your art that you have taken up, seeing women in these like fantastical situations. So like what would you like to see more of in the art world, and like what areas of the art world do you think black women should take up more space in?
Yeah. Um, I think at least on my personal Twitter, I always tweet about, oh, I want there to be like a Black Girl Magic TV show, like literally magical in that sense. But I feel majority of the spaces in the world, whether it's tech, whether it's art, whether it's medicine, I believe we need more Black women in those spaces because a lot of our voices aren't heard, a lot of our stories aren't told. There are Black people in those spaces, they're just not
Mm-hmm.
being seen, they're not being heard, they're being pushed aside. And I know there are times where companies really try to push and say, oh, we want more Black people, but the Black people they even have on their team, what are you actually doing for them there? And we can see there's nothing to show. That's why I definitely believe in the art community. Like there needs to be a bigger push to really elevate these artists because there's so many different parts of the art community, like different mediums. Like you don't hear about like different sculptures or just even painters or even digital art illustration. Like it's becoming such a big thing where art is so broad in how you can describe it, but yeah, we're still struggling to get our voice heard, to be seen in those spaces. So I just really believe that I feel that we're present, I feel like we're there, but we're not
Mm-hmm.
being seen.
I wanted to also ask you if you could talk a little bit more about Afro-Unity, which is like that term that you created.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that.
It's something I've noticed growing up, just like there's a division between African Americans and Africans. And I also just want to include like the whole African diaspora just in general, because there's just so many parts of us where there's so much similarity, yet it's the small things where people nitpick, or it's what they're being shown in the media, that those perspectives where it really just throws it off. Because if they could just have a small conversation, they'd be able to see, oh, you're not like this. Oh, you're not like this. Wow, we have so much in common too from it. And it's just a lot sometimes because I am a Nigerian-American. My parents were
Mm-hmm.
born in Nigeria. My sister was born in Nigeria. Me and my brother were the only ones who were not. And so growing up, you'd hear your parents talk one way and you're just like, oh, my black friends aren't like that. So why would you assume that they're all in a stereotype like that? And then when you hear like my parents would even say their own experience with Black Americans, and they'll be like, "Oh wow, they do this and this to us, and they assume that we're like this." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe you should educate them on that and let them know, like, hey, this is not how we're like." And I mean, at times it's difficult to be in that position where you're educating someone, especially after they've seen you and spoken to you in such a negative way. But I also feel that as humans, we're constantly learning, we're constantly evolving, and I believe there's a chance where you can always take that step back and use it to educate someone rather than demean them. There are parts of African American culture where Africans also use it in their culture, and then there's other parts of African culture where African Americans use in their culture. And there's just so many things where they can connect. And I honestly just hate the fact that there's such a divide in it. And just
Mhm.
growing up alone has shown me, like, I believe it's up to at least our generation, since we can see both sides, to, help clear that up, help push people into the right direction, or at least give them a little insight on the other people's culture, because you really don't know until you actually take the time to know somebody to figure out who they are. So that's definitely why I came up with Afro-Unity, that my art will showcase parts of African American culture as well as my own heritage of Nigerian, and a little mixture of Africa as a whole. So
It is an opportunity to educate other people, Afro Unity. But I think also something important to stress is like, it isn't completely your burden to educate other people.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it's, at some point, like, you have to do the work for yourself.
yes.
So,
Definitely, which is why I really appreciate how, at least what I've noticed in a lot of people my age group, where they're taking the time to learn other people's cultures, they're taking the time to backtrack what their parents have taught them, and make sure that what they're doing is not in that same manner, that what they're doing is actually something positive, or not continuing that cycle of hate.
So outside of your work with like Afro Unity, I've noticed also like going through your Instagram and seeing your paintings and things that your work like often engages with like activism directly. And I'm thinking about the End SARS painting that you made, the Black Lives Matter painting. So I guess my question for you was, is it difficult, do you think, to speak out in this way through your art? And how do you think that art is, or like, do you think that art is an effective vehicle for activism?
So when I create art for activism, at times it's difficult for me because personally I like to make art where it makes someone happy. And most times when you are trying to, you know, get a point across for certain issues going on, it's the art piece may not be as happy as you want to be going through it. I'm pretty sure there was times where I'll be painting and I just feel so much pain and burden. I'm just crying low key, and I'm just like, oh, I just want to stop. Like, this is not me. I like to make happy. I want people to be happy, but realistically, people are going through things. There's so many issues in this world, and it's okay for me to take that step back and say, hey, I can create art that is beautiful and happy and uplifting, but I can also make art that is meaningful and impactful. And if it's some way I can get some words across about an issue, I can, put that one on a platform. Why not?
I also want to point out that, like, even like you mentioned that you like to make art that is happy and that showcases like Black joy. And I think that's also like an act of activism because often those narratives where Black people are just happy is often missing as well. So I thank you for the work that you are doing, active, like directly addressing social issues, but also that your art, I want to validate that it, in and of itself, it is a form of resistance. It is a form of activism. So, um, I guess since you have been like so, I think like vocal about like your own experiences during this time and like how it's been impacting you, what type of support do you think that Black women, either in art or just in general, need during this time where everything is in flux, everything is a mess?
Um, I honestly feel like we need people to actually care about the issues, and then from caring, do something about it. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
one thing I noticed last year, and even though a lot of people recognize like Black Lives Matter as a movement, people protested, they signed petitions. If you look at all of the cases they focused on, how much justice did they actually get? Which police officers are still free? Who
Right.
actually made it to jail? And I honestly, I don't know if it was just me noticing this, but it felt like even though they made such a big noise, nothing really happened. No one really questioned that afterwards either. There was so many things that went south, and it honestly broke my heart because you would hear people, they made so much art. They even made a documentary on Breonna Taylor, and nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happened at all. Like, so I don't want just our voices to be heard. I want some action to back it up to show that people care. And if they don't care, that is fine. I want at least Black women to know in themselves that, look, if you can at least care about yourself and be intentional in the ways of how you take care of yourself and the people you care about, I think that matters a little bit harder.
So now we're introducing hot topics. Okay, Boma. So, I know that people will be seeing this interview long after February, but especially during Black History Month, I think we see a lot more of outpouring of like performative social justice. People, they want to dig through their past, find their one Black friend that they have a picture with, and post that. So, um, I guess, how would you distinguish what is performative versus what is genuine?
Yeah. So at least for performative, I'd say it's just there in the moment, kind of like how we described earlier. Like there's no follow-up plan. They're kind of just using it at that point to help themselves rather than the actual cause they were focusing on. But for more real support, it's following up, actually caring, continuously behind the scenes, even if no one's knowing what you're doing, you're still going to do it for Black Lives Matter. How when it first started, there was so many negative words about it, so many negative connotations to it, to the fact that people were saying our lives matter. And it wasn't saying that our lives matter more. People had to explain that multiple times. It's kind of the same way you would say, oh, save the whales, but you don't hear people say, what about the dolphins? What about the other fish in the sea? Like, no, that's not what they're saying. You know what we're saying, and you're choosing not to by saying, what about all lives matter? So it wasn't until like recently, it picked up. And I think it's because it picked up really well because a lot of people were still working hard behind the scenes.
My last question, like in hot topics, is about microaggressions. So, especially in like this current climate, I think there are a lot of ways people are educating themselves, but they also like tend to slip into microaggressions as well. Like, I don't see color, or anything that starts with I'm not racist, but. So, have you experienced any microaggressions in your life or in art? And like, how would you combat them?
Yes. Unlike a lot of my friends I've met at college, I've been going to like predominantly white schools my whole life. It's something that I'm so used to now that it takes me like it really takes somebody else next to me saying, "Hey, what you said wasn't right," and I'll be like, "Oh my gosh, they're absolutely right. They said that to me," and I just stood there and I'm like, oh, "Okay, I don't care at this point." But when it comes to me, and if they're saying it to me in that manner, I usually don't care as much. But if it's to somebody else, I usually would speak up and say, "Hey, that person, why would you say that in that manner? Why do you feel that way?" Or just kind of like questioning why are they thinking about that in that manner. Hey, that might not be the best way, or just ignore them in general because I'm not going to let them steal my joy. There's only so much joy I have right now, so I have to hold on to what I have. I can't let someone come and ruin my day because of that.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I feel like, yeah, you should prioritize yourself. Like, If you know that you are experiencing something that is not right, then prioritize yourself, make space for your own joy. I just have one last question for you, and that is basically a lot of people who will be watching this is a young Black artist themselves. So, do you have any encouragement or words of wisdom or advice to give to them?
Yeah, just keep going. Don't listen to what they say if they tell you you're not good enough or that your art's never gonna make it. Because as long as you believe in yourself and you find that right support system, keep going for it, chase your dreams. Honestly, I'm doing this art personally right now for you so that you can continue going on because I want more Black people to get into art. I want this to be a generational thing where we're invested and we use our art to just really uplift and love ourselves. So please go for it. I need more Black artists to follow. Go for it.
It's no longer an ask, it's a command.
Man, please, I'm begging at this point.
Thank you for supporting Black women. Until next time.